without having the right amount of water in your system, you start to lose functionality, both like brain functionality, physical functionality, all these things. So water is extremely, we're very water needy. It's super important to us. And I want to talk about like the super extremes, like really hot, really cold. When it's really hot, we think of water as being like, well, we lose it through evaporation. You know, we're sweating a lot. We lose a lot through evaporation to cool us. But in cold weather, even weather like today, it's actually just as important to drink a ton of water. And where people don't think about that is because they're not sweating a lot. But think about like walking over here, your eyes start watering, right? Because your eyes won't work right unless they have water. The reason that you get a runny nose is because your nasal passages don't work right unless they're moist. If you're breathing air that's under 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it has no moisture anymore. And your lungs won't work unless they have moisture. So your body's constantly pumping water into your lungs, and you're just breathing that out and not getting any back in. So you actually lose tons of moisture if you're out backpacking in the cold. If you've ever stayed out in the tent overnight in the cold, your tent, if it's not vented properly, will have a layer of frost on the inside when you wake up in the morning because of the amount of water that you exhale. So that's something that people don't always think about, but it is super important. And thirst, that's actually a really late indicator. Like, when people say, if you're thirsty, that's when you should drink, you should be drinking before that. You should be peeing, like, constantly, clearly, and copiously. Like, it should be happening. I mean, granted, if you're taking B vitamins or certain medications, it might make it darker, but if you're not peeing or you're thirsty, you're probably already behind. I mean, I would say that so many Americans are chronically dehydrated. I mean, so many people get fatigue just because they're dehydrated and don't realize it, which is a huge thing. Winter. So winter, unless you're on a day hike, and I don't know how many of you winter hike or overnight backpack in the winter? No, maybe. So if you're day hiking in the winter, you should be carrying all your water with you, and insulate it. I mean, they make like neoprene sleeves for water bottles. You could also just take a wool sock, put it on it, that'll help. I would also, another little trick, little pro tip is do it like this and put it in your bag like that. The reason is water freezes from the top down, so you won't have it. You won't be jamming the top of your bottle. If you're starting to do overnight stuff, you're gonna have to boil it. And boiling snow takes forever. It takes forever and it takes a lot of fuel. I mean, snow is 90% air. If you can get an ice source, that's actually much better. But snow takes forever. It uses tons of fuel. It's just part of the slow process of winter and overnight. It's just part of what it is. Another tip that I want to say about winter stuff is that when we start going through these filters, when we have mechanical filters like this, all of these actually, you're putting the water through a physical filter. When you do that in the winter, you get it through once, and then after that, you're screwed because it's frozen. So you can't do it anymore. You might be able to use something like a SteriPen, you might be able to use chemicals, but chemicals, when it's really cold, start losing their ability as well to be able to process and treat the water. So just things to think about. Generally, you're going to be boiling because you don't really have another option. All right, let's talk about what gets into water. And like you were asking about Harriman, right? So in the Northeast, well, in general, the main things you have to worry about in the backcountry are bacteria, protozoa, and viruses, right? Viruses are not a big issue in North America at all. If you're traveling overseas, if you're traveling somewhere where it's more remote, third world, you're gonna have to take that into account. But for us, we don't really have to deal with that. As a matter of fact, all of these things will take care of at least the bacteria and protozoa. Some will take care of viruses too. But viruses really aren't our concern so much. being in the Northeast or even being in America in general. One thing I would say to keep in mind is that we have to be careful with cross-contamination, and that will get you into more trouble than anything else. So if you're, say, using a gravity filter, which we'll show you, and you let the faulty water get on the out hose, you might be drinking that faulty water. Even though it's going through a filter, if it gets onto that hose, it can still drip in. And we're talking about microorganisms. It doesn't take much to get that into your water. Although, that being said, in the Catskills, over the past 20 years, I only know one person who has gotten Giardia, which is the main thing that you really don't want to deal with. It'll give you diarrhea for a long time. Yeah. Also, with cross-contamination, obviously, if you're in camp and you're, say, cutting meat or, processing food that might have something on it, sanitize your hands afterwards. After you use the bathroom, sanitize your hands afterwards. You don't want any of that kind of just being on your hands and getting onto things that you want to use, for sure. Although I will say that in the Northeast specifically, or it depends on where you are, when you're traveling, you can use your own judgment. Generally, someone's going to find you within 72 hours, for the most part. If you left your plans, people know where you're going, and you wander off trail and you're lost, they're going to find you within that amount of time. Something like Giardia won't actually start affecting your system for about a week. So if you're lost and you're really in a dire situation, and you find a puddle, as long as it doesn't have a dead raccoon in it, drink it. Like, keep yourself going, keep yourself alive, because what'll hit you will probably be after you've already been found, and then you can get on antibiotics and can be taken care of. One last note before we move on to the next piece is a little story about a winter trip. So you think of snow and you're like, well, do I need to bring it to boil? Do I not need to bring it to boil? It's snow, it's clean, whatever. I was on a trip with a friend of mine about 5 years ago, and it was kind of later in the spring up in the Adirondacks. There was still, a good 4 feet of snow on the ground, and the hemlocks had started scattering their seeds on the ground, and we were taking and boiling our snow and cooking it. And on day 5, we realized that they weren't seeds from the tree, they were snow fleas. And we've been drinking snow fleas for 5 days. And so, we didn't get sick, but it's good practice. You don't necessarily always know what's in that snow, even if it's beautiful white fluffy snow.